Hello all, this is the research paper Q&A for Religious Studies 102 World Religions. I've compiled a list of the questions that you all left on the Google Forms and have separated these into kind of some general categories, including general questions, formatting, sources, etc. A lot of these questions I noticed cover the same information I covered in the guidelines, so please make sure that you're thoroughly reading the guidelines and any other information I provide for the course, as this will help you with your assignments and work and so on. So somebody asked, what exactly do we have to write the research paper on? I know we had to send the proposal, but I was confused about how we're supposed to write about a religion. So you're not writing about a specific religion, you're writing about a specific passage from a religious text. So this can be a historical ancient text, or it can be a modern religious writing in a religion. What you're going to be doing is focusing on 5 to 10 verses, 5 to 10 sentences or so, and doing an exegesis or kind of a commentary on each of those verses. So you'll break this up, and I do have an example on Blackboard for you all, but you'll break it up where you have a verse or a sentence, you talk about it for a paragraph or two, and then you move to the next verse or sentence, talk about that, and so on. Will we stop going over material to work on our paper, or will it continue in the same bulk? There won't be a stop to the material in the course. I try to keep, when you have a big assignment due, so for example, an outline or a rough draft, that you have a little bit less work that week, but you'll still have readings, videos, and so on, just like you would in another class. You can find the syllabus schedule on Blackboard, and you are welcome to work ahead on the paper. So as soon as I give you feedback on your brainstorming, on your annotated bibliography, you're welcome to work on that. So my schedule is usually honestly less than what I would usually do in a course. So if you're in one of my in-person courses, you usually would be doing the same amount of work you're doing in a week in 1 or 2 class days. So you have actually quite a bit more time to work on the research paper in this class. Is there a specific question we'll be answering for the research paper? Not a specific question, but you're going to be kind of explicating or exegeting the passage you're working on. Is all the information requirements about the research paper posted in the syllabus? There's a general description of it in the syllabus, but the guidelines for the research paper, which I linked in the module on Blackboard for this week or last week, explain everything you need to know about the research paper. Have you utilized this assignment before? And if so, will we have access to previous students' work at the end of the term? I have a sample paper of a student's work from my Religious Studies 101 Old Testament Hebrew Scriptures class under readings and handouts on Blackboard. It's not a perfect paper, but it was a high A paper, and the student did a really good job with the writing and the content. It was just a few formatting issues that the student had an issue with. But overall, it was a really great paper. So if you want to look at that, that should help you know what I'm looking for. Should I include a brief summary of the history of the story before talking about my passage? Absolutely. So I would very strongly recommend that you have your brief introduction to what you're covering in the paper. So you're going to, lead into an introduction, have a thesis statement. And then after your thesis statement, you should be providing some kind of brief context section. And in this, you can talk about authorship, composition date, kind of about the religion as a whole, how this ties into that, the purpose of the passage, the audience of the passage, and those ideas. And that should help you kind of establish that before you get into talking about the passage specifically. When analyzing our passage, what aspects should we focus on? Should we write about the cultural impact, historical impact, what the passage means, or something different? All of those in some sense, and I know that sounds like a lot. Your focus should be on what the passage means in the historical context of when it was written. So if you are working on a passage from the Quran, for example, you'll be looking at each verse specifically and thinking through in the 7th century CE, what would this have meant to people then? What was the idea behind writing this passage? You're welcome to briefly think about how this impacted history, the culture, the religion, and so on. But your focus should be kind of on the historical and literary value of the passage you're working on. You have a specific way for our thesis to be in our paper. Your thesis statement should usually come at the end of your introduction paragraph. So your introduction for a short paper like this should probably be around 5 sentences or so. And your last sentence of that introduction should be your thesis statement. Is this essay just reading and interpreting the readings we chose? So rather than kind of just reading the readings or passage that you chose, you're doing a critical reading of it. So you're thinking through things that you don't understand, or maybe you think might have historical or literary value, and examining those more closely. If we're looking at this kind of in scientific terms, it's much like you would dissect some, animal or laboratory study. You're going to, see this passage as a whole, but then take it apart and look at the little parts that create it, and then research those and tell what you found out about those pieces that make up this entire passage. What are some examples of what to talk about or points to hit since this is non-confessional? Really, as long as you're using reliable scholarly sources for your research, that should help you work with the passage in a non-confessional way. I'm looking for you really to just pick apart each verse and think through again. I know I'm repeating myself here, but history and literary value of each verse. And I'm assuming this is it. Am I able to compare some common themes with other religions? Yes, but keep this brief. So again, the focus is on the passage, and you can make these comparisons, but it should be one sentence and very minor in your paper rather than kind of paragraphs about this. There may not be enough information or teachings to talk about from a specific chosen passage and realize it's too late. So your passages, there should really with any of these, and if I've approved it, you should be fine and good to go. There should be enough information about them. If you're struggling to find sources about the passage, then let me know and I'm happy to see what I can find for you. Possibility of writing more towards opinions rather than facts about the passage. And making sure you read the material unbiased and for knowledge of the religion. So these things, again, using reliable scholarly sources should help you with this. And if you're having trouble with this in your outline, your rough drafts, I'm always happy to help and I'll give you feedback on that. So if I notice that you're kind of verging into more confessional, not fact-based language, then I'll let you know, and you're not going to lose a lot of points there. It's just to kind of help you get a good final draft. This is obviously a very specific one about some of these passages. So if this is your question, just feel free to email me and we can talk about this specifically so I can help you find sources there. For formatting, is there any writing guidelines like font or size of text? Yes, these are in the guidelines for the research paper. So Times New Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, kind of your standard writing requirements for a research paper in college. I'm using APA format for my paper. And formatting how to cite documents like the Bible and the Tao Te Ching and the references. I will see if I can find, there are usually websites that help citing religious texts because some of these are different. What you'll notice when you're citing religious texts, specifically ones that come from different languages, is that you'll need to include the translator of the text. And usually you're not going to have an author. So you'll have like the New Oxford Annotated Bible, but then you'll want to put in the editor or the translator, as well as your general publication information. Is the only length requirement 4 to 6 pages, or is there a specific word count that needs to be met as well? Same question here. Yeah, so 4 to 6 pages is the only length requirement, but this needs to be 4 to 6 full pages, not including bibliography, and following the formatting guidelines of Times New Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, etc. I know the tricks, right? So I know the increasing your punctuation to 14-point font, adding space after each line, adding extra text to space it, but making it in white font so I can't tell. So I know that there's a lot of tricks out there. And first, it's not going to trick me, but also think about how much you're actually writing here. If you're including the verses and the passages that you're working on in bold, which you're required to do, you're really only writing about 3 pages worth of material. And that ends up not being that much. It will help you in the long run in this class and in other classes to do your own research, to write your paper well, even if it's not great. I would much rather see a paper that you wrote, that you were honest with, that maybe has some mistakes here and there, rather than something that you've tried to add some deception to, like increasing font sizes, or adding extra lines to make it seem like it meets length requirements without doing it. Honestly, you end up doing a lot more work doing that than just finding more research to help you meet the length requirements in the first place. Is the cover page us putting all the information required on the page and then starting our writing body on a new page? Yes, if you're doing an APA paper, you'll have a cover page where you do that. If you're doing MLA or Chicago, it'll be a different format. Certain type of citations. I know Chicago style is highly recommended, but will we get points off for using a different one? MLA, APA, and Chicago, any of those are fine to use. Just make sure you're consistent throughout. I recommend Chicago style if you want to, if you're in history, religious studies, or a field like that you're probably going to continue using Chicago style in just to get familiar with it. If you are in the educational field, social sciences, you'll probably use APA, and it's fine to use that in this class too. If you're in English, I think film studies, MLA is going to be where you're probably used to, and you're not going to lose any points for choosing a specific one. Just go with what you're most comfortable with, or what your field uses. Or if you want to try something new, you're welcome to do that as well. So questions about sources. Where would you recommend researching to find the best information on the Quran? WK Library is the best place to start. There's quite a few books on the Quran. You won't probably find quite as many as on the Bible, but verse by verse commentary should be helpful here. You also, depending on the passage you're choosing, think about what the theme of the passage is. So focuses on women. If you type in Quran and women on WK Library, you might find some helpful sources there. If you search the specific surah that you're working on, or Quran and whatever the surah number is on WKU Library, that should help you find articles as well. How many sources do we need to use for the paper? So for the annotated bibliography, you're required to have 5 sources, not including the original text. So at least one of these needs to be some kind of verse by verse commentary if it exists for your passage. So if you're using more of a modern religious text, like the Dalai Lama's Ethics for the New Millennium, you won't find a verse by verse commentary. But if you're using an ancient religious text, which I think most, if not all of you are, then you will be able to find those sources. So it's 5 for the annotated bibliography, and you should kind of keep these 5 unless some don't work or you find more as you go into your final draft. So in your final draft, I would love to see at least, I guess I would say 4 sources in your final draft, because this is going to help you get the best idea of what the passage is about. I think this covers what other sources to use besides the original text as well. I read the guidelines for the annotated bibliography and have struggled to find scholarly sources. Where can I find those online? Yeah, so your high school, your local library probably won't have any sources that are going to be helpful to you. WKU Library is going to be the place that you're going to want to start your research. And you should be able to access all of the online articles, and sometimes there's online ebooks as well. And you'll be able to access those from home with your WKU login. If you're on or near campus, WKU Library has quite a few. They've got 9 floors of books. And you'll be able to find some great books there as well. Also, if you, and something I would recommend, if you find a book at WKU Library that's right in person, like it's in the stacks, but you're far away or you can't make it to the library, look on Google. Sometimes you can find PDFs or even really good previews of the books that let you access most, if not all, of the books. So that should help you out as well. Annotated bibliography. How should it be set up? So there is an example of an annotated bibliography where you turn this in. So you can look at that for an example. I also have specific guidelines for this in the research paper guidelines. Generally, you're going to have the full bibliographic entry. So not just a URL, but the full bibliographic entry. And then under that, a brief paragraph talking about what the source is about and how the source is going to help you in your research. So that kind of answers this next question about relating to the topic and the suitability of the source. It's usually good, especially for more biased sources, to explain the authorship and how it's going to help, even if it is biased. So definitely consider that. For the outline, what secondary sources should be used from verses? The secondary sources you're using here are going to be the same ones you're using in your annotated bibliography. You're welcome to add more sources, but generally you should be, the annotated bibliography is compiling your research, and the outline is starting to use this research that you've compiled. So the secondary sources you're using here are the ones that you've already compiled in your annotated bibliography. So if you have any more questions that this didn't cover, or you had one of those specific questions, feel free to email me. And otherwise, I hope that your writing process goes well.